Hi, thank you for joining me today. I'm Lori Carpenos, and this is a monthly show that is a reflection of a book called The Secret of Love. That's what we call the show. And the book has been out a few months now. And the reason I do this is as a public service, because we'd have a different world if more people understood what is written about in this book about the mind, how our human mind works, and I suspect, the animal mind is pretty similar. And by having this simple understanding that we feel what we think and that our experience of life is happening within us. It's not like we're walking through life recording it. We're not walking through life like cameras or tape recorders recording what's out there. We're really imbuing what's out there with our own perspective, with our own thinking. Now, the way this translates to relationships is quite something. It really is something to consider, because it's really hard to blame somebody else for your feelings when you really, really understand that your feelings are coming from your thoughts, not about what the other person is saying. It's your thoughts about what they're saying. So, if you like what you're hearing, there are previous episodes that you can go on YouTube to have a look at. But today, I want to talk about the art of listening for connection. Whether you want to connect more with your spouse, your significant other, your children, your parents, even elderly parents, there's a secret to this, which is also quite amazing when you test it out for yourself. So here it is. And I'm going to be talking the full half hour about this, but to give you one simple point, to listen for connection means having your own mind as blank as possible. And I think you can relate to how unusual that is, because when you're speaking to your significant other, a friend, family member, do you sometimes get interrupted? And the person will ask you a question which in your mind is unrelated to what you're talking about. You're in your flow, you're expressing yourself, you're sharing what's on your mind. But then you get cut off innocently. The listener is doing that so innocently because they're looking for information that their brain wants. They're not looking for the information that you're offering. That's a big difference. So if you listen with interest and curiosity in what the other person, the speaker, is trying to convey, what feeling is behind their words? What are they conveying? You get really curious without listening through the filter of your own thoughts, which might be, when is she going to stop talking? So I can get a word in edgewise. When is he going to tell me what I want to hear rather than what he's sharing? Those are the kinds of thoughts that go through most people's minds when they're listening. Check it out in your own world. See if, maybe it's just happening in my world, but I've heard from clients and colleagues that this is really quite common. In fact, I'll read you a quote by Sydney Banks in chapter 17, and this chapter is called Listen for Connection. So the quote is, "Words are merely a form. Listen not to words, but to that which words attempt to convey. So a really good listener is listening deeper than the words of the speaker. They're listening for the feeling. They're listening for connection. They're listening for the nuances of, and you don't want to be thinking about what you're listening for, because this is all automatic when you just get interested in what the speaker is trying to convey. So your mind is off of yourself, off of your own thoughts, and curious about the speaker. Now, a question might occur to you in a moment of silence, like the speaker comes to the end of their words, and a question might occur to you to help you go deeper into what they're conveying. But the question should come from what they've been talking about, not from your busy mind. It's a huge difference. And there's another couple in the book. We start each chapter with a quote from Sydney Banks, and then we illustrate it with examples from real lives from our clients, my co-authors, clients, and my own, and also our colleague stories. They submitted a lot of stories for the book. And then we pull it all together with what we call a reflection. So in this one, we called the couple Karen and John after they learned how to listen to one another. Can you see that when couples listen to one another with an open heart, without judgment or defense, they will hear things they would never hear otherwise. They will learn things about themselves and their partner they could never learn if they remained focused on their personal point of view. You know, and that is just, and then they also had to see the innocence in one another, to be able to listen openly without bias. You know, seeing the innocence in the speaker, that in that moment that they're speaking, that's what they're seeing, that's what they're experiencing. They can't help it. They can't see or experience anything else in that moment. That's the operative phrase, in that moment. Because in the next moment, they could see something totally different. You don't have to say anything for that to happen. That happens automatically. And going back for a moment to the first couple I read from the book about, where she was talking about her coworker at work, and he thought he heard this story 100 times before, but when he really heard it, he realized that she was looking for something totally different. She was even expressing something totally different than what he thought she had been expressing all those other times. He cleared his mind, he listened from his heart, and what he heard was that she really just wants to feel accepted in her position at work. That's what she was looking for. She wasn't looking for a solution to a problem coworker. She was just not feeling fully accepted. When he heard that, that turned into a whole new conversation, a whole different conversation that got resolved. So she never brought it up again after that. I mean, that's how remarkable really deep listening is. It's like an art and a science. You know, with greater understanding, you're able to listen deeper. And when you listen deeper, you see how that plays out in life. It really is so connecting and freeing too, because it's nice to take a holiday. it's freedom from your own brain. You know, we do that when we're on vacation. It's like automatically we take a vacation from our brain. We get off our own thinking. And how often do we get really good ideas that just come to us out of the blue? We don't have to have such an active brain all the time that we have been conditioned to have. It's like a habit that people get so caught up in their own thoughts, their own brain. But take a break, and it's a holiday. It's freedom from that grinding, which is quite stressful too. And a great way to take a break from that is listening to anyone who's really wanting to convey something to you. Just come out of your own brain and into the other person. In my counseling practice, we call that intake, where it's like taking in the person. We're not listening for the events to solve individual problems. You know, they'd have to go to therapy forever because there's always some new dilemma or some new issue. But when you listen, or as a counselor, you can do the same thing. Listen for how the person views life. What is their worldview? How do they see life? How do they see their world and the people in it? And how are they experiencing their experience? You know, it's a funny way to think of it, but anyone's experience, given a different person having that experience, they'd have a different personal experience of that event, right? So two people can be involved in the same exact event, but they're going to have a different experience of it. And if you're not judging it, wow, that's just unbelievable, to be able to be heard without judgment, without criticism, without defense. In a previous segment, I talked about ego. When you let your ego drop away, that feeling of self, personal, when you let that drop away and you're just there in the moment, most people think that they're really good listeners, and they don't know, they don't realize that they're listening through their own thinking. So when you get that from somebody who, you know, interrupts you or sends you on another trajectory you hadn't planned on going to and you're really not interested in going there, realize it's innocent. And you can say, you know, I'd rather not address that if you don't mind, or I could tell you about what I think about that later, but I want to keep going on my line of where I'd like to go with this. Or just switch off and ask them a question and listen to them. Because I think, you know, it's easy to get lost in your own thoughts as the speaker too. So don't forget that you want to find out from the listener how they see things. And that's another little tip I'm going to share here, which is it's always good to, as the listener, to wait for the speaker to ask you for your opinion. You know, I think it's very common for all of us to give our opinion about what the speaker is talking about unsolicited. That's unsolicited information, you know. And you're going to not make an impact with the listener if you're giving your opinion and they didn't ask you for it. Now, this is really common between husbands and wives, where, you know, it does seem to play out that, I know it's said a lot, but it also does seem true, that the male brain wants to fix things. So if a husband is listening to his wife complaining about what's going on at work, he will be tempted to offer his suggestions and his advice. Well-meaning. It's really well-meaning. The husband wants his wife to feel better. And the wife just feels worse because she wants to just talk, just have somebody listen and feel compassion for what she's going through without judgment. You see, if somebody tries to fix a problem without being asked, it feels like, to the speaker, it feels like judgment. Can you see how that is? So the speaker's going on, and we'll call the speaker a she, and she is just wanting to get it off her chest, vent, and have a compassionate ear. She may not even be going through what she went through hours ago in the office anymore. She might have calmed down from that. But just getting that compassion and not sympathy, but understanding. That's what you want to do as a listener. Listen for understanding. You don't have to fix anything because, I've been talking about in previous episodes, and my two guests who came on, they've been talking about the same thing, that we're always experiencing what we think anyway. And that thinking changes. It shifts and changes, sometimes on a dime. So you're never stuck feeling miserable forever. You're never stuck feeling badly for any length of time, as long as you're not giving it energy and overthinking it. It'll pass. You'll be onto something else pretty quickly. So I spoke a little bit a moment ago about how, men tend to listen to help. And there's a story in here about that very thing. If I can find it here for a moment. Here we go. So the fictitious name we gave this person who's one of our clients, Alan, he said that suddenly his own thinking, he realized he was involved in his own thinking too much, and he let that drop away. And he realized that as his own mind quieted down, the more interested he became in what his wife had to say. And the less interested I was in my own thoughts. And before I knew it, I was fully with the experience that she was describing. I began to really hear what Jean was telling me. The quieter my mind got, the more engaged I became. I could understand her feelings more clearly than I ever had in the past. Judgment never crossed my mind. Now, this is really interesting because it was the same exact story he had been hearing from his wife about her office, a coworker. And he heard the story fresh, absolutely fresh. From that point on, she didn't have a need to tell the story anymore. The story kind of disappeared. It wasn't a thing anymore. Maybe it wasn't even a thing for her at work anymore. But isn't that interesting that she was talking about the same coworker giving her a problem. We all know that the problem was in her own thinking. But at the time, it appeared to her that it was the coworker doing it to her. And she would come to her husband and want him to get it, to just get what she's going through. And when he listened quietly and really felt connected to her, that's when she felt he got it. And the whole issue disappeared. So that's the power of really listening, that people want to feel a connection and they don't know how to go about it. I run a group for people. There's quite a few people in there who have this, what's known in society as social anxiety. So they're really into their own thinking, worrying about what they should say to kind of fit in and not feel so outside the group, And what they come to find out is that when they let go of those insecure thoughts and they just listen to what's going on, they lose themselves in the listening process, in the process of really getting into what's going on for the speakers. Then they lose their own fearful thinking about when they're going to have a moment to insert something into the group. And guess what? The flow of the conversation just naturally leads them to join in when it's appropriate. There's this, we talk about the human mind. That's what goes on behind the brain. The brain is like the computer. Well, there's a universal mind that's this creative intelligence of the entire universe. And we're part of that, whether you realize it or not. We go out in nature and we're in awe of all that nature has for us, and we're in awe of children and animals, and we forget that we're part of that. So when you trust that more, when you trust that unlimited, innate intelligence that's behind the brain that can often get really cluttered and busy-minded, when you just settle down and trust in that bigger mind with a capital M, you might say, you'll feel a flow. It's like being in the flow of life, and you'll know when it's time to listen deeply, and you'll know when it's time to interject something, to ask a question. And there's a philosopher, Voltaire, a quote by Voltaire, and this dates back centuries ago. The quote is, "The ear is the avenue to the heart." Wow, that's really powerful. But we've been using the ear as the avenue to the brain quite often, the way society has been going, that we do our listening to inform our own personal thinking. Whoa, what a difference when you use the ear as the gateway to your heart. It's really a heart-opening experience. You're opening your heart to the other person's experience, what they're trying to convey. That's when couples talk about having pillow talk before going to sleep. I love that. And that's when you get the best connection, when you just really, they're just listening. Now, I'm going to leave you with one little tip, right? There's many wives I hear from when I'm counseling and coaching couples. There's many wives who will comment that their husband is too quiet, but that's a different quiet. The wife can know, that she can sense when the husband is being quiet because he's really listening to her versus he's being quiet because he's not really interested and he tuned out. So that's what I'll leave you with. And, thank you so much for joining me. And please send questions. You can send questions to me through the studio here or through my email address, which is my name, Lori, Lori, at 3principlestherapy.com. And the 3 is the number 3. Thank you again. Look forward to seeing what comes up this month, this coming month for you.